hi guys. So if you have listened, hopefully I have recorded this in order and posted it in order. This is the episode 2 of the Occam's Razor podcast. My name is Savannah. I am the host. There may or may not be people here who are also hosting. If they feel comfortable, they may pop in at any time. Otherwise, it's just me. Today, I have Talia on. This is the author of What We Fed the Manticore. And we're really excited. This is a book that was assigned to some of us in Trins class, and I know a lot of us at Occam's Razor are reading this. So please give a warm welcome.
Ooh.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. You have a beautiful campus, by the way.
It's so great. It's one of my favorite things is that even if it's rainy, even if it's sunny, like no matter what the weather is, we have a really great view of the skyline always.
You do.
And it's like San Jose to the city, which is really cool. And I wish that like we advertised that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know if a lot of students would come to campus if they're like, wow, it's so pretty, but it's gorgeous.
It is. It is absolutely stunning.
So thank you so much for coming in today and talking with me. This is going to be just like fun and casual, and I'm just going to shoot you just ideas off the brain. But we just finished up at the Core Center. You met with us for a class, what we call Distinguished Writing Series, and you read to us some of your book. And I do want to say it's an assigned reading, so I'm reading it like I'm supposed to. But I read the first one in the book, which is The Good Donkey, and I absolutely was fucking bawling. Also, we curse on here. I don't know if I'm supposed to or not. We may or may not bleep that. But I was bawling. It was so good, and I don't know. I think my reading is very like slim on like what I read, and that's what's also great about these classes is because they put me in front of things that just like a wonderful like variety of things. And I don't know if I've ever really read anything where it came from the perspective of an animal. And I almost only want to exclusively read things that come from an animal now. Like it was so good. It was so beautiful. It was devastating. I just want to tell you how much I really loved it and how much my husband was really concerned about me bawling last night on our couch.
Thank you so much. Devastating. So I nailed it. Thank you. That's the highest compliment. Uncontrollable crying is what I was going for. I'm kidding. So it's funny that you say that, now you want to read things from animal perspectives. Partly one of the reasons why I wrote this collection and wrote every story from an animal perspective is because I was struggling to find work that did that. And, one of the things I tell people a lot is when you're a child, all of your best friends are imaginary giraffes, and then suddenly you turn 12 and everyone thinks that you're interested in people only. And that's not true, Yeah. I think of the world as this really multifaceted, just lush, diverse space where so many different things live. And I refuse to believe that animals and plants and fungi don't have agency. I think that they have, personalities and dreams and souls, and I wonder so much what they think about the world around them. And so I wrote this collection to tell those stories to myself, partly. Also, there is a tradition of animal perspectives that you'll see in some global literature and some like traditional storytelling. And also there are some classic books like Watership Down, which is one of my favorites, that speaks from an animal perspective. One book I do want to shout out that I'm always shouting out to people when I talk about this collection is Yoko Tawada's Memoirs of a Polar Bear. If you have not read that one, it's a book in 3 parts, and each part is a generation from a polar bear family, and it's
heartbreaking, devastating,
and
all
super
above.
Awesome. Also, super awesome.
I think there's 2 things that you said there that one of my favorite short stories ever is The Paper Menagerie. By Ken Liu. It's so fantastic, and I find myself rereading it all the time because it's that fantastical realism, surrealism, and it's really great because he brings to life these animals that aren't really animals, so it's reminiscent of that. But I think you said something really interesting right now where you said for whatever reason when you turn 12 all of a sudden apparently we don't we don't think about animals like we used to, or that's treated like it's a childish thing.
Yeah.
And I took a comics and graphic novels class last semester, and it's a very similar thing of like we treat cartoons, comics, etc. as like, oh, this is only a narrative for like children, which it's like that's like the furthest thing from the truth.
Absolutely.
And there's like a conversation to be have about like adult joy in general, and that like if you enjoy these things, there's like inherent societal like shame on it, which is so sad. I'm starting to connect some of these like bigger ideas. I just read Audre Lorde's an essay that she wrote, and it's The Power of the Erotic, and it's interesting because she talks about the erotic and like we are the ones who bastardize erotic, and that it's not just a sexual thing, but it's this overall like self-fulfillment, and this idea that like how like for us to deny ourselves a joy is like is exactly what colonialism wants to do. It's exactly what like racism wants to do. It's exactly what the patriarchy wants us to do, and that we find our power in the things that we joy. And that, she's saying, her argument is that is like part of the erotic, that the erotic is so much more than this tiny thing we have made it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's sort of like, you know, eroticism and also some like childlike interests in a lot of ways are about being in the body, right?
Yes.
And so it's like the older you get, the more you're expected to sterilize your experience and step out of the body and into an office, is sometimes how I think about it.
To slowly die.
Right. So I thought about like, I was thinking about, I was walking barefoot in my backyard recently, and I was thinking about how like when I was a kid, like I was really into mud.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone was also like, let's make some mud. This is like a thing I was super obsessed with, was like, take a hose. And I grew up in the Bay Area in like the 80s and 90s when like there was a really profound drought at some point in my childhood. And I remember I would get in so much trouble because my mom would like walk out in the backyard and she'd find me with the hose just like dousing all the dirt to make all this mud. And then I realized, you know, recently when I was like walking barefoot in my backyard, how I was thinking about like, oh, well, I need to make sure to wipe my feet off before I go inside. And it's almost like I had this perception that like dirt was like, you know, incompatible with my life.
Yeah.
And I think that like, you know, earthiness and animals and, you know, teeth and all of those things are these really, embodied experiences. And maybe I want to crawl back into that, I think.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And when you said that, I could literally, I had a distinct memory of my brother and I like playing in mud outside. My mom like literally picking in both of us up one arm at a time and like hosing us off before we come inside.
That's what you do. Just with the hose.
I think there's something there too. There's something that I think for me, something that was always said that I find interesting. I originally come from like the wine industry, or I come from originally a different industry, and they always say like, oh, winemaking's not sexy. And I'm like, I argue so differently. I was like, there's actually nothing more. I think there's something so like viscerally beautiful about being out and working and like getting dirt under your nails.
Sure.
And then like being in plants or just like feeling the sunshine. Like I actually feel the opposite of that. And so that's saying it's used all the time in the wine industry. And I'm like, I think you guys don't understand.
How is fermentation not sexy? It's like creating life.
It is. Like, how is it not? It's literally two things, like eating, consuming each other, and then making something else, and that byproduct is like enjoyed. Like, how is that not? Right. So I think our idea around sexuality, our idea around eroticism, our idea around joy is so, like you said, sterilized now.
It is.
And you do like a fantastic job about like just really kind of re-tapping into, I think, of a lot of like basic emotions and feelings. And when I was sitting there and I was crying reading this story, I like at the very end, you're like, the story is very much like we talked about earlier. This is about Gaza. How do you pronounce Gaza correctly?
So I've been learning to pronounce it correctly, and I don't know that I'm going to do it correctly now, but I have been hearing people pronounce it Gaza.
Gaza.
Yeah.
Like a little
bit of a GH.
Yeah. It's very clear that this book, it's mentioned, or not the book, but that specific story is about Gaza. And yet you don't feel like anything is being like pushed in your face at all, because this is all from the perspective of like a donkey. But then when you get to the end of it, it is nothing but that. It is nothing about the hope that was like crushed in it. And it was so... it made me feel like a little bit ashamed, because I was just like, these are the feelings I should be feeling all the time when I hear about Palestine in the news. But for whatever reason, it really tapped back into like that humanity part of myself that I think can get lost in the minutia of life. Like I was re-tapped into like, no, this is fucking tragic. No, this is an absolute atrocity that happens. And like you were able to get that back from me by writing it in the way that you wrote it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Sometimes you're just so bogged down by like all the news happening at the same time, and you just kind of need a new perspective on that. And I think that's why I retapped back into that primal understanding of what's going on. Right? You're so shocked all the time by all the bad news happening, but it's only when you see like the hope that was there that you start to feel like what was lost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for that generous reading. Wow.
Isaac.
Yeah, I just wanted to think like, oh, this is currently relevant, and it has been for a long time. That's why the impact of the stories that we hear, they impact us so. It is that through the story, which is told from the perspective of Ananki, is still very humanizing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I remember you were reading it out during your visit, and I just felt myself hit by all the feelings of it. And it's like, why don't we have, or why am I not engaging with more of this?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is something we see, this is like a snapshot of something we see in the news or we hear online all the time, and we grow numb to it, and it is important to be brought back down to earth, to be reminded of the humanity and the beauty and just the meaningfulness of all of it.
Yeah. Well said, both of you. I think this is like a really great lesson as to like why writers are important, because like we're saying that we have journalism, we have news, and we hear about it all the time, and yet what you were able to do in like 12 pages in like a short amount of time of what news has been trying to convey to us like in months, it suddenly just was able to hit. And I feel like this is like a great example of like why writers matter, like why creative writing is so important. And it's really sad because I feel like we see a diminishing of it over time. I know that journalism is like or I don't want to say diminishing, it is evolving into other things that we don't necessarily know how to wrap our brains around, but this is just it's so wonderful. What I do want to touch on, because I know that we talked about it earlier, but you had said that writing is not your day job.
No.
Yeah. Can you tell us about your day job?
Yeah. So my day job is I'm a public sector attorney. I do environmental law, and a lot of people, I think, a lot of writers probably have this fantasy that they will be full-time writers, and I know that there are some that are fortunate enough to do that, but many of us have another job, because the creative drive is sort of an irrepressible need to express, but it's not always compensated with a living wage is maybe the best way to phrase it. And the desire to make something doesn't always mean that you'll be able to just meet your needs with that. So, I think it's good to have another job. This one in particular is good for me because it's a research-based job and it's using my words, and so it exercises that muscle, but in a different way. I did say in my class visit that I've been told that the best day job for writer is florist. I've not tried it, but
I want to understand that. Like,
I think about it actually. It's like a tactile sort of, completely different practice, still creative. But in more of your senses, I'm assuming. I've never been a florist. But, I think that's like one of the things that any writers out there listening, I would like to say is that it's okay if you do not make a living from your writing. You are still a writer, and it's okay if you aren't able to write every day. Still a writer. So it's a creative practice that fits in different corners of your life.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point too. I'll come back to the florist thing, because I think until like you mess up a bride's like arrangement, and then like I guess when I think florist, I just think of like angry brides, and I'm like, oh my god, that sounds so stressful. Yeah. But that's like a great point of, I think there's this fantasy of like like when I'm a writer, I'm a full-time writer, I'm like the New York Times like bestseller, and of course all of those people make hundreds of dollars, or like hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions, and then they're like, no, I'm a New York Times bestseller, and I maybe made like
$4,000
like off of the book.
Yeah.
But I think there's something there about this idea behind like what makes me like a writer, or like for a long time for me, I just kind of started calling myself a writer, and I just felt like I haven't written enough. I write a lot of stuff in my head, but when it comes to like putting it down on paper, there wasn't too much that I put out there yet. And I think I had an idea of what I thought that looked like. And I think I've also come to an acceptance of like, wait, my writing ebbs and flows very much so like the ocean. And if I wanted to create an entire career around just that, I imagine I would drain that ocean dry pretty quickly if I'm not doing something else to like also gain inspiration, to like get to know myself better. Because in a lot of ways, I think writing is like articulating yourself. It's getting to know yourself.
It is like, it's exactly. Oh, I love that you said that, because I always think of like writing, creative work is the core of its purpose is understanding the self, right? And your place in the, how do you fit in the context of the world? How do you feel about it? What does it mean to you? What does it look like to you? And like, you are like the mirror and the lens, you know, for your own understanding. And I think that sometimes that means you have to have these, what some people may call fallow periods, but are more like chrysalis periods, right?
Oh, what a great way of looking at
sometimes
that.
I even call it marinating. I'm like, I'm marinating an idea.
I like that. Yeah.
Cook it later.
It's cooking.
It's tasty.
Yeah. So it's like, I mean, you know, it's, you're a writer if you have, if you have a creative engine, right? And it's word based, that makes you a writer.
I think that we are like, I don't know, programmed or conditioned to believe that there is going to be like this one big thing that we do in life, that's going to be like a career, like a career, a job, something that we are going to spend all of our time doing, and whatever else comes second. And I think something I'm still struggling to understand or just believe in is the idea that life is made up of a lot of things.
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
I just look at some people and I think this person is just such a unique combination of interests and habits and passions, and that it is important to remember, like, you know, even if you're writing a lot, or even if you're not, you are still a writer, you're still an artist, you are still creating.
Yeah.
The magnitude or the scope or the amount of what you're making does not define you. It is the simple act of creation that is the gift.
100%. Oh, I love that.
Okay.
That's beautiful.
Snap. Yeah, that is beautiful. I think that is something, and I don't know if this is a generational thing. I don't know if this is something that's always happened. But it just, there's this like concept of like, you're supposed to do this one thing. And I think for me, I've always been somebody who's like had so many different interests, and I've always wanted to pursue so many things.
Yeah.
And I'm surrounded by a lot of people who kind of do like one thing. So then it's hard to not compare yourself or be like, oh, is there something wrong with me? Or like, no, I'm not this, because clearly that's what that is. But writing, I feel like, has actually, I've articulated more of myself, and I've articulated the fact that I have lots of interests, and I think what's really great about writing is it allows me to kind of pursue them in this deeper way than I would have before.
Sure. I mean, like, you can climb into any skin, right? So like, it's writing is perfect for the multidimensional, you know, sort of a Renaissance person who wants to do everything.
I've always called myself that as a little kid. I used to call myself a Renaissance man. Sometimes I still
love that.
do.
Yeah, well, I think we're all a little bit of a Renaissance man. I think because, I mean, also, right, it's like driven from curiosity. You write because you want to know, and you want to know because you're curious, and you're curious because you want to try everything. And I think that's a beautiful gift.
You discussed something earlier too when we were in there, and it was about honesty, and then I was just like, yes, honesty. And it was the concept behind, and I'll let you say this in your own words, but we discussed a little bit what we were saying of like the honesty and the truth in writing, and
yeah. So, and I want to connect this to another thing in a second. So I was talking about how being vulnerable, like if you feel vulnerable when you're writing, that's probably because you're saying something that's really honest. Because like if you're being honest, you're exposed. And you know, that's such a important thing for me in my work, because when I started writing and taking my writing seriously as an adult, I did what a lot of people are told to do, which is you write from your own experience. And everything I wrote was just awful. It was awful, so bad. It was like I would read it and I would cringe the minute I started rereading what I'd read. I was cringing as I wrote it. It was just the worst. And, you know, I was it's because I wasn't able to get far enough outside of myself to be honest about how I felt. And so one of the advantages of choosing animal narrators is there's enough of a sort of species difference and species distance that I feel as though I'm not writing about myself. And then I infuse all of my personal feelings into every character. So a lot of my friends who write more realistic human-based fiction, everybody assumes that their main character is them, and it's not, right? They'll be like, this is not me. It has nothing to do with me. But I will tell you, every single one of my stories, that's Carrot. It's me. It's all me. 100% me. Because I'm taking how I feel, and I'm taking what I think about things, and I'm taking like how I'm affected, and I'm just injecting it into this animal and like filtering it through them. And so I feel protected, because no one is going to read the story and be like, you are definitely that wolf. They're not going to see that.
You're the manticore. Ouch.
Right, but I am, you know, so it helps me feel safe enough to be vulnerable in my work. And I think, honestly, like the work that I'm most affected by when I read stories that feel, you know, sort of like the raw underbelly and very exposed, I see myself, and readers will see themselves. And so when you see yourself in work, and it's like communion with the writer, and so you feel the connection.
Wow, how beautiful.
Right. And then so that's how the emotions are brought forth in a reader, if they can feel linked.
Yeah.
I think that sort of perspective really does remind us of the multifacetedness of the individual.
Yeah.
About how many pieces of us are taken and sewn in with such care, and that they reach a reader who can empathize not only with maybe the author or with the characters, and also understand a little bit more about themselves because they can see it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons why I really enjoy fiction is because I'm able to think about something that maybe I've been thinking about for a while, or I take these like parts of myself or these people that surround me and kind of put them somewhere. But because it's fiction, and because I don't see it as me, no matter how much that person resembles me, I don't see it as me, that I'm able to stop fighting these ideas. Because when I start writing in a personal narrative, my big fear is being misrepresented or misunderstood.
Yeah.
So then I start, really manipulating, and now I'm doing a bunch of stuff to where you're not really seeing whatever I wrote is just like this really bad Frankenstein monster version, because I'm fighting it too much.
Yeah.
So the fiction creates just enough distance for me that I can inject these little pieces of myself without me trying to paint them to be pretty, paint them to like paint out all the ugly things, or like, paint out all the ugly things. And working in nonfiction has been really interesting. It's been a struggle for me this semester. We have a great professor, Sarah, and I really enjoyed the class so far. And I just wrote a piece called Why Smut Matters. And it's about panic attacks that I was having and how smut saved me in my panic attacks. And I got to explore it from like a very interesting, like a little bit of distance, because I decided to go from first person to second person voice of a how-to guide. But it's about trying to create that distance to where I could be very honest about this thing, and yet it doesn't feel like me. So are there other ways that you've created through your authorial voice that distance where it's just enough of you but not too much that you feel that you start to fight it and try and paint certain aspects of yourself?
Yeah, right, because you don't want the writer to show, right, in the story. So
or at least you don't want it to show that you've manipulated yourself too much.
Yeah, like the mechanics. So third person can sometimes be really useful for that. I haven't written in the second person, although I'd love to try it. I love second person pieces. So third person is another technique I use. And then the other thing is maybe injecting myself into different characters, but not all the way into one. So
like divvying it up.
Yeah. little bit of me here, a little bit of me there, but not all me anywhere.
And then conflicting them together.
Yeah, but you know, we're all internal conflict all the time, right? It's multiple selves in one.
Yeah, I think that's like the beauty about like writing too. I think we could probably all agree is that like it's so therapeutic because you're just like really doing some like exploring there and kind of getting yourself out. And it's so funny. I always surprise myself at the end of a piece where I'm like, oh my God, I just discovered something about myself. No. And like I, for whatever reason, I like forget between each time that like I did that. Yeah. That like I did that thing or that was there.
Oh, that's so great. But now you have a record of it, right?
Now I have a record of it. Yeah. Also, I don't know if you two have this problem, but me trying to explain what I wrote. So the piece that I wrote for Occam's Razor that you read was a mother dies because she was impaled by a loose beach umbrella, and having to explain this to like a person is really hard. Do you ever... And I think every piece that I write, whether it's that dramatic or not, and then trying to explain to somebody, I'm like, no, but it's really funny. It's hard. Do you ever feel when you have to explain what it is that you wrote, like a quick snippet, do you also feel like a little nervous or self-conscious?
Oh gosh, yeah, all the time. And part of it too is that like writers, we all have like a side of us that's introverted. So if someone's like, tell me about your book, and suddenly I'm like, I don't know how to read. I can't.
I don't know, I just wrote it.
I can't.
Oh, you go read it. You know?
And then like I go into the like self-deprecation, and so like sometimes people would be like, well, you wrote a book, what is it about? I'm like, well, it's stories narrated by animals. And they're like, so what's it like? I'm like, I don't know, do you like polar bears and crying in the airport? And so so
have you ever thought about your mother's death?
Do you like being sad? Yeah. So it's difficult, right? And so also I think that like, you know, we all have like our drafts, right, that have so much more than what ends up in the final version.
Oh,
so
yeah.
there's layers, there's history, there's an alpha version and a delta version, and so many different iterations of the story that what it means to you is infinitely more complex than what can be distilled into a single sentence. So yeah, I do. I struggle with that. I don't know how to explain it.
Which if you ask me to explain somebody else's book, I'd be like, okay, listen here. Right. But when it's something that I've written, especially the piece that I'm referring to, I don't know how to explain it, and I don't know if that's because it's like such a part of my own like self and my thoughts and my ideas and like things that I think about. I don't know. But it's an awkward experience. It's something I'm kind of trying to work through right now. Or also, I don't know if you guys ever get this one, Isaac and Elijah or Syra, who's off camera right now being awesome. Off mic, sorry. And I don't know if you felt this way too when you're writing. I often get like, so what do you want to do with your like? What do you want to do with that? Or news, guys! I just got accepted into an MFA program.
Oh my gosh! Congratulations!
Which I'm really excited about.
Congratulations!
But I told some people, they're like, great. What do you want to do with that? And I'm like, it's the worst question in the world.
I don't like that question.
Program.
I hate it.
You're like, I'd like to begin.
Yeah, like I hate the question of like people be like, so do you want to write? And you're like, well, a writing MFA would imply that yes, I would like to write. And I think maybe what the question is they're like, and I guess maybe this is me reading into it, is they're like, oh, you think you're going to be successful at that? That's kind of what it feels like to an extent, because somebody would never be like, oh, I'm really excited, I'm going to do my grad program in electrical engineering, and then somebody be like, cool, what do you want to do with that? You would never ask somebody who's getting a grad degree in electrical engineering, be like, what do you want to do with that? Like it's obvious. Was that, I know that you said you have a degree in something else, but when you started to pursue writing again, because you told us earlier you wrote as a toddler and then you wrote as an adult, was that something that you got often?
Yeah, I mean, if every writer is going to get this. So most of the time, people don't normally take it seriously. And I think that that's a really common experience. I'm sure you've all had that same experience, as people are not going to take your art seriously. And so it's you have to take it seriously. It has to matter to you. And I think just, forget the haters is what I would say. Don't let someone's disbelief in the value of art deter you from making art.
Yeah.
It's the thing I love about the art so much is that this is sort of how our collective human culture is preserved. And everything you write is going to be part of this like intergenerational conversation, and someday someone is going to read your work 10, 15, 20, 100 years from now, and it will help them understand something about how we live today and our culture and our life and our experiences in your life. And that's such an important it's such an important legacy, no matter how small or big it is, because we're a collective species, and we are curious about our past selves, and I think that it's beautiful to want to participate in that.
Yeah, brave too.
Yeah,
because you said, like, putting yourself, I think your piece of writing, no matter what, is like you being vulnerable and like putting yourself out there and having to be brave is so hard.
It is. It takes a lot of guts to say I made something and I want to share it. And you know, anytime someone says, what do you want to do with that? I think to myself, I certainly hope that someday that person finds something that inspires them as much as creative work inspires me.
Yeah. Do you feel like also, I mean, some people have asked me this, and I don't always feel like it's with malice sometimes, but a lot of the time, by and large, it doesn't feel like with malice. It just feels like a misunderstanding of like what creation kind of is, right? And I always wonder, I'm like, is there a difference between like us, like people like us here in this room, and people like them? Do they not have a creative thing that they really believe in? Or like what's the differentiator that, to me, I see a bunch of value in it. And I think I wrote in my personal statement of like, I don't write because I want to, I write because like I need to, because like I feel it in myself. I don't always have a fun time when I'm writing, believe it or not. Writing those jokes about a funeral like were always really fun. They're funny towards the end, but it's like this need to. And I think even if I don't, I think I fully accepted that I'm probably not going to make a bunch of money off of this, and yet that hasn't changed how much I need to do this. That hasn't changed how much I want to do this, or how much this makes my life worth living. Like, and it's interesting how we like trade this aspect of things. Are like, well, what's the monetary value out of it? And to me, I'm like, what's my life value out of it? Like, this gives me life.
Yeah, I love that.
Like, the money will like keep me alive, and I'll figure out how to like make that happen. But this gives me the will to actually live. Yeah, it's the sustenance.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm interested to hear what you all think, but I just, you know, the internal drive, I think, comes, maybe it's a reference back to what we were talking about earlier, you know, the childlike wonder that some people end up burying in themselves, and maybe it's in there, and they just need to find the right thing to unearth it.
Yeah. Isaac, Elijah, what do you guys think? Do you think there's like a difference between them and us? Or
well, I do think that a lot of people have a writer inside of them. I just think the type of writer would be different. And I also think that they don't have the opportunity to be a writer is to be vulnerable, is to express like the deepest inner workings of yourself, even in fiction and fantasy. I'm a big fantasy writer.
Yeah. You're a good one too.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
I would.
But in fantasy writing, a lot of people tend to fall under the trope of like, oh, it's just, you know, elves and dwarves, and no, it's not that. It's a whole inner mirror of a world, and it is up to the writer to use those different tools that fantasy has created to show an inner part of themselves that wouldn't make sense otherwise, right? Like, why would it be fantasy? Why does it matter? And I do think that, you know, again, different types of writers exist, right? And, you know, I just do think that maybe this needs to be exposed, you know, like, you know, poetry would be a thing, nonfiction's a thing, which is, you know, what we're learning. Yeah. I think people should just give it a try. You know?
Yeah. Isaac? Panic. You know what, and I think, Elijah, to what you're kind of saying, and I really enjoy, I love reading fantasy, and I think it does a very similar thing to what yours does, in the sense of these sometimes real world topics that I literally cannot bear in real time. It suddenly gives me a lens that I can take it without absolutely wrecking me. And I think yours did that to me. It gave me a lens to where I can see what's going on without it completely like burning me completely, not until like the very end. And then I had to take a very human look at myself, be like, I see this in real life. Like it provided a lens to very human experiences and human emotions. And I like fantasy for that reason. Sci-fi does kind of scare me because sometimes it's too real. I'm like, oh my God, this could happen. And it's mostly because I lack an understanding of science. That's not like planned science, but I mean, Isaac, you write a lot of or sci-fi, right?
Yeah,
I don't want to say like a lot of sci-fi. You write a few different genres, right?
Yeah, I don't write as much as I'd like to, but I've written some sci-fi, some fantasy. With my sci-fi, it's generally very light, not much on like, not heavy on the technological costs, like.
It's very human experience focused.
Yeah, just set against like a sort of science fiction, like sort of almost fantastical background.
Yeah.
So.
I like your writing too, and you're a fantastic artist.
So nice. Yeah, it's so wonderful to read.
Yeah, that's actually been like a really great benefit. Syra, who's off mic, has fantastic writing too. Like, I feel really strongly about our writing like group that we have these semesters. Like, we're all such strong writers, and I feel like we get to learn from each other. And that's something you were talking about earlier too. I had asked the question, like, how do you build the confidence to reach out and pitch your ideas to some of these magazines? And you had said that you have your own kind of little cohort. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh gosh, love my writing friends. Like writing friends, fellow writers is just one of the most important relationships you can have. And you know, I met them through workshops, right? So we met when we were all fledgling baby writers and just starting out, and I think that means you can grow together, and I love that experience, and they actually are some of the most treasured friendships I have, again because of that vulnerability, right? We trust each other with, you know, I'm trusting you with the inside of my brain, and you're trusting me with yours, and, you know, treat it gently but respect it enough to give me a critique, right?
Yeah.
So like that's
such a delicate balance.
Right. And like another writer, they know how that goes. So like I think that I absolutely adore my writing community and my writing friends, and I love to connect with other writers because I think through lifting each other up, that's how like literature as a global phenomenon can continue to thrive. I think that storytelling is recursive in the sense that like me telling you a story leads to you telling me a story, and they go back and forth in this sort of like spiral until we're all communicating something and connecting through our storytelling practices. And that's an old tradition. Every part of the world, human beings have sought to explain the world around them and where they are in it, and it's just to me a beautiful practice.
Yeah, it's such a human experience.
Yeah,
like so uniquely us, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Although we don't necessarily have proof that it's unique, it could be the animals, like we're saying. They may have their own practices that we're completely unaware of.
We don't speak whale yet, so we don't know.
Almost there. I am definitely convinced that orca whales share. Like, I mean, we have proof that they communicate with each other in really sophisticated way.
Yeah.
I think they for sure are storytellers.
Yeah, whale song, absolutely. There's got to be some sort of, you know, intergenerational culture. So we just, you know, we haven't tapped in yet. Well, we will.
Yeah.
It's actually a new course on Duolingo, you know?
Yeah, whale.
They have whale on
They have whale on there. It's a brand new course.
I'd take that.
Yeah, I would too.
That sounds tight, actually. What are some tips and some ways that when it comes to feedback, like what are things that for you when you workshop and when you're giving feedback on a work, like what are things that you do where you're providing care to the writer while still maintaining honesty and like productiveness, like helpfulness?
Yeah, so that's such a great question because I'm still actually learning how to give feedback productively. I think that's a lifelong process. We're always learning how to be better readers. And for me, you know, it's just the fundamental would be that I would read a story several times before I come up with feedback. Make sure I get a first impression, and then I read through a couple more times just to sort of interrogate what my first impression was. And I try to
I like that interrogate. That's like, yeah,
did I get this right the first time? Did I misunderstand it? And I think also I try to imagine what is the writer trying to say? Because I think that, we all have our own voices, and I think the purpose of critique is not to rewrite someone's piece the way you would want to say it, but to imagine how to help them communicate what they want to say as effectively as possible. Like, how can you get it as close as possible to what they wanted? And so that's what I tried to do. I first tried to get into what is their aesthetic, what is the flavor that they're projecting, and have they deviated from what they've established as their aesthetic, or am I confused?
Really
so
smart.
I think about am I confused at any point in the story, and what would help me understand it better, and then I provide that kind of feedback, and then I kind of explain it as, this is just me, one reader, and this is how I understood the story. Is that what you wanted to say?
Yeah,
that's such good advice. Yeah, not good.
No, go ahead,
I'm glad to hear it, because I'm still learning how to do this.
We're all always learning, I think.
Yeah, part of the workshop classes that were part of one of the books that we've read is the anti-racist workshop book, which was really fantastic, and we talk a lot about the concept around workshop, and I think that's what's really cool about our workshop classes, is that it's not just literally trading work and be give me your feedback, that is a part of it, but we talk about the concept a lot, and we talk about what are we trying to do here, and we try and give feedback in really helpful ways, and then trying to get rid of the old school Iowa MFA show don't tell kind of things, trying to get rid of that, and because up until I don't even know how long ago, the idea of workshop and what provided was from a white straight male point of view.
Sure, the
so
silent
then
author. And...
Yes, so that's what shaped so much of what we read, which will get boring. It, that's just it. Not because that genre or whatever is boring. It's just that when that's everything, when it's homogenous, that within itself is boring. So I think what you just said is really poignant, because you're saying, focus on what the author is trying to say, and what can I do that helps them clarify that, instead of being no, this is the standard of how we write, and this is how you should write. So flipping that, I think, is really, it's a hard skill to do. It's so much easier to be nope, this is how we write, and here's the checklist, and you didn't do the checklist.
Get your Freytag triangle in the right spot. Because I don't have an MFA, I feel I have a little bit of an advantage in the sense that I come to writing and critiquing from a
fresh,
purely uneducated perspective. I have, it just it started as vibes based critique. Am I into it? But the book I love to recommend that I used recently when I was teaching last summer is Craft in the Real World. Has anyone read that one?
No, I think that was recommended to us though.
It's so good.
I feel like I've heard the title.
Yeah, Craft in the Real World. It's written by Matthew Salasis, and I hope I pronounced his name correctly. Sorry, Matthew, if I said it wrong. He's a wonderful, fantastic writer, just absolutely brilliant. And he wrote this craft book that does bust apart, really completely busts apart the workshop model, and turns it on its head and provides other options, right? So other options for how to... Are we all good?
Yeah. No, we had somebody who really wanted to come hang out with us. We're sorry, we're really exclusive here. Just kidding, it's janitors.
But so it's a great book because it actually it provides other ways of reviewing a story, and it also says that stop being fixated on a single structure, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes there's
breaking form is something we talk about.
Be free.
Yeah, right. Because Savannah, you brought up a good point about if the Iowa workshop model is from this, how did Raymond Carver write a story? Which, okay, hey, cool, Raymond Carver, awesome. But it's only one part of the world, right?
Yeah.
There are lots.
We don't all need to write like that.
We don't all need to write like that, and I think a lot about global storytelling traditions and oral storytelling traditions, and how in a lot of different parts of the world, religious storytelling is very infused in the literary culture, and so all of these things provide us other ways of telling a story, and I think that sometimes they break the form, right?
Are you laughing at that, the religious storytelling?
Yeah, a little bit. Also because they made Isaac yawn, but
He yawned, I yawned.
Religious storytelling so boring. I mean, but
no.
We're tired of hearing about the Messiah who died and came back alive.
But there's like others, right? There are other traditions. Mm-hmm. There are other religious traditions that contain storytelling, and then they can get for example, so in Hinduism there's this text called the Bhagavad Gita, and it's a frame story. It's a frame story.
Can you explain what that means?
It means that there's like a story that begins, and then inside that story the story contains a storyteller who tells another story inside, and then there's this other book that
kind of meta,
right? Yeah, story inside a story. So, but there's the frame story is actually a very common technique. So, 1001 Nights. Frame story. Oh, yeah. Salman Rushdie has used frame stories. There's a wonderful book by Vikram Chandra called Red Earth and Pouring Rain, which is like a frame inside a frame inside a frame, and so you can do this sort of nesting doll scenario. So I think that looking for techniques like that to reshape your narrative or give it some spiciness and flavor and intrigue and interest is a really, really fun thing to do. And so I like to explore all those different options.
Yeah, learning the different forms is really cool, and I love when it's so easy, I feel like nowadays, to end up in a vacuum of whatever your likes are, and I think that's a product of social media. I think that's a product of it's easy to end up in that cyclone of familiarity.
Yeah.
And so that's what I like about meeting new people and having a book recommended to me, because it does feel like you're opening a whole another part of your brain of oh my God, what a brilliant way to write that, or what a brilliant way to tell that story.
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys. Do you guys have growing, I guess I call it, to me, there's growing reading, and then there's ice cream reading, which is where smut falls for me. Smut is so good for if it was a food, I say this in the essay, if smut was a food, it'd be ice cream. It's not really good for you, but it's good for the soul. It's good for that purpose. Not every type of reading has to fulfill a purpose, but then I read things that I think in a human way, in a biological way, in so many different ways this change me, and I need that just as much as I need the simple brain turn off thing that I get from smut, right? So I guess those I have a separating of I need all of these things.
So I've fallen into a pitfall of what I feel like a lot of people that are trying to improve on the craft fall into, where I constantly critique everything. And I'm how does that make sense in story terms of what's that character arc? And I'm oh, okay. And it's gotten to a point before it's gotten to a point where I can't enjoy reading anymore. It's just how do we improve on this? I've lately just gotten to just have fun with reading and writing again, which is I think what I needed the most after a large burnout. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just dipping your toes back into stuff you've read before. Have fun with it. I do think fantasy is kind of both of those for me, honestly. Really good fantasy books. I don't know if you read, The Way of Kings before. It's a huge thing.
I have Brandon Sanderson on my TBR.
So nice.
It's so good. But his writing really speaks to me. He talks a lot about duty and stuff like that. And, from where I come from, from an Asian American household, it really opens your eyes to a lot of oh, wow, huh. I can't believe that's there, right? A lot of people experience the things that you experience, and I feel those kinds of writings are both ice cream and also growing.
Yeah, when you find something that's a little bit of both, you're wow, that's great. I think that's something I strive to do. But yeah, I think creating a really good balance, because there's certainly things where I'm looking to turn the brain off, Kindle Unlimited. What do you got? Show me what you got, buddy. And then there's times where I'm things like this. Another book that was a required reading that I cannot stop recommending is Sabrina and Karina.
Oh yeah.
Which if you caught me at the end of a long day, I'd be I can't read that, but
so
I need to
right?
read it. It's so, and now and I have a feeling your book is going to be one of those ones that I can't stop reading, because to stop reading it would be to turn my back on humanity, would be to turn my back on and that's something that you said earlier of it is, and it was a James Baldwin quote. Would you mind repeating it so that I don't mess it up?
It's I hope I'm gonna say it right. I mean, I was referencing I wasn't quoting him directly, but I was kind of summarizing what he and other writers have said, which is that, like, you know, part of the writer's duty and sometimes burden, right? Task, duty, and burden is to bear witness.
Yes.
And I, you know,
and you do that.
But thank you.
Yeah.
I think we all do that, right, though? So either you're bearing witness to your internal landscape, or you're bearing witness to the world around you, or something that's a combination of those things. But, like, you know, we're experiencing life and interpreting it for later readers. And I think that in a lot of ways that is a responsibility. And it kind of, to me, I think about it like, you know, I've been asked before, like, if I consider my work political, or I think one person asked me if it was activist, and it was a great conversation, actually. It was another podcast I was on, and I'll repeat something similar to what I said back then, is that I think that all work is political, because we all exist within a system, and we're articulating our space inside that system. How do we navigate it? And for some people, that navigation is very easy, and for others of us, that navigation is very difficult. And whether or not your experience of a power structure is negative or positive will probably influence what your work is like. But articulating that is political, because it speaks to what your position is.
I do feel like when you wrote, you know, The Good Donkey, I think you navigated it, you know, trying to speak up about this issue in a way where it wasn't. A lot of times people just like shove their ideals down your throat, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like the way you delivered it was so captivating. It was so hard to look away from it, because it was in a way where it's like, right? It's not like in your face.
Thank you.
It's so smart. It's the decisions you made in it. It just amazed me.
Yeah,
honestly.
you're not pandering in any way. Like, you and I think these are the, like, marks of, like, a great writer, and of like this destroyed me, and I can't wait to finish it, to be destroyed again, and then to, like, gift this to, like, everybody. I mean, like, it's so beautiful. And, you know, shout out to our professors, Trini Dalton, and then the other professor we're referencing, Sarah Borjas, because they God, do they care. They care so much about us, but, like, also because they're picking stuff out, and they're finding people like you that are, like, so important to, I think, the writing world, and so important to us, you know, as writers who want to, like, grow and get better at our craft.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that generous reading. I appreciate that a lot.
I mean, we're kind of wrapping up here. Otherwise, I will keep you guys forever. I need to make sure I don't. The four of us definitely have a project we said we'd work on, and I know that you need to get going. Do you have any last pieces of advice, or do you two have any last questions?
What's the history behind the title?
Oh, yeah. I love titles, right? So that's like my favorite.
Oh, yeah, because one of the other stories in here is, how do you choose that?
Yeah, so the other there's another story in this collection, and that story is titled What We Fed to the Manticore. And, like, sometimes I get the title before I get the story, like, it just sort of arrives. And this particular story, there is a manticore, which is a mythical beast that many people will say was inspired by a tiger, and it's sort of how people who had never seen tigers began to understand tigers. And a manticore is, you know, got scorpion tail and a gajillion teeth, and they're
in a man's face,
and a man's face inside a mane.
And that's the part that, like, is the most, like,
creepy, very
like,
creepy, skin crawlingly creepy. But the title just sort of, like, arrived early in writing that story, and then when I was finalizing the collection, my editor, who I'll shout out here, Elizabeth DeMeo, is amazing. She and I were talking about, like, well, what do you want to be the title story? And I said, well, I've got like 3 stories that I think I would be happy with that title on the cover of the book, and that was my first choice. And she said, yes, me too. That's my first choice also.
Okay, out of curiosity, what were the other 2 that you were thinking about? Because there's one in here that, like, every time I read the title, I'm like, I can't wait to get to that one.
So I thought about using Someone Must Watch Over the Dead. That was another title I thought about.
That's one of them, yep.
Just for everyone listening out there, it's narrated by a vulture. I don't know if you like carrion birds. I love them. They're awesome. Yeah. And then I thought about also, I'd actually have to look at my email to her, but I think the other one I was thinking about was the last story, which is called Let Your Body Meet the Ground.
That was the one that I was thinking. We're locked in. Our Bluetooths are on. Every time I read that one, like Let Your Body Meet the Ground, I'm like, I get this visceral idea of like getting my belly like to the ground. I don't know why, and I can't wait to get to it.
I'm not going to spoil it for you.
Yeah, don't spoil it for me. I can't wait to get to it. The Manticore one is like, as you can see, I have it bookmarked. I'm not done with it yet, but fudge does it give me the heebie-jeebies every time he comes around, and I'm like, tigers, run! Like, get away from him! I don't like him. He creeps me out.
Oh, good, nailed it.
Like, oh, he just like the tigers are like so great too so far. Like in their conversations, their names too are really like interesting and fun. Like, isn't one of them Little One or?
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, like this is really good. It's a fantastic book. I can't wait.
Oh, you gave me another hook. If you like tigers, you will love this book.
Yeah, if you like tigers, this is the one for you. If you're scared of men that are tiger men with scorpion tails, this is for you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Which also, I'm sorry. How do you pronounce your last name?
Kolluri. I'll say it for everyone listening out there. My full name is Talia Lakshmi Kolluri, and my book is called What We Fed to the Manticore.
What a wonderful book it is.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and spending time with us. We appreciate it. If you guys are listening to this, thank you so much. And hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. If you have any questions, hit us up on Instagram. So thank you so much for listening again, and bye.
Bye.
Thanks for having me. Bye.